Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling something that is literally the ultimate balancing act of our time. How do we grow our economies without completely destroying the environment in the process? We're pulling from a deep dive analysis by Urban Panorama to really unpack this deep-rooted friction. Because look, we all want better living standards, right? We want economic growth and to eradicate poverty. But what actually happens when the very engine driving all that growth starts chewing up the natural foundation it's built on?
Okay, let's dive into this, because I gotta tell you, the clock is ticking and it's ticking loud. Just look at 2023. The global average temperature spiked to 1.46 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Honestly, that made it the absolute warmest calendar year we've ever recorded. We are basically teetering right on the edge of a major climatic tipping point. So this isn't some sci-fi distant future problem anymore. This is our present-day reality, and it's totally dictating how human progress can even move forward.
So here's our quick roadmap for today. 1. Economy versus environment. 2. India's environmental crisis. 3. The human and social cost. 4. Global climate threats. 5. The sustainability pillars. And finally 6. Policies for the future.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1. Economy versus environment, the fundamental friction.
To really wrap our heads around this challenge, we have to totally rethink the undeniable relationship between economic activity and nature. So, the crucial point is, the environment isn't just some pretty background scenery. It plays a highly active, incredibly vital economic role. The source text actually frames the environment as a producer good. Think about it. Water, soil, biological resources, forests, these are literal productive assets. Their quality directly dictates the productivity of the entire economy. But, and this is a massive but, there's a brutal flip side. When we degrade the environment just to chase short-term growth, it hits us with massive hidden costs. We're talking lost labor productivity because people are sick from pollution, plummeting crop yields because of soil erosion, and completely devastated coastal tourism. At the end of the day, degrading the environment means you're just degrading the economy itself.
Moving on to part 2, let's zoom in on India's environmental crisis to get a real ground-level view.
To see how this friction actually plays out in the real world, the research zeroes in on India. Now, this is a nation juggling two massive competing pressures: widespread poverty and a totally desperate need for rapid industrialization. And the sheer scale of the issue? It's staggering. Out of India's total 329 million hectares of land, a whopping 175 million are currently considered degraded land. Guys, that is well over half the entire country suffering from severe environmental stress.
So what's actually driving this massive loss of usable land? Well, it's an incredibly vicious compounding cycle. We've got rampant deforestation, overgrazing, aggressive mining operations, and frankly, poorly placed development projects. And it gets worse. Even intensive irrigation practices are backfiring and literally salinating the very soil people need to farm. And all of this is being hyper-accelerated by the twin engines of poverty and rapid population growth.
Which brings us to part 3, the human and social cost, going way beyond just the numbers. You know, it's super easy to get bogged down in hectares and atmospheric data, but environmental degradation is deep down a profound human tragedy. Just look at this one statistic. Every single year, over 500,000 people in India are forcibly displaced by development projects. These aren't just abstract economic shifts. We're talking about entire communities being utterly uprooted and left with zero alternatives. Families are torn apart, and the vital generational structures of social and economic support are just completely wiped out. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world heartbreaking consequences of unsustainable growth. Listen to this quote from a major survey of folks who were displaced by the Riahan Dam project. It says, "Many of the ousties, particularly the tribals, have fallen into the typical cycle of debt bondage. Most were simply kicked out with nothing left to fend for themselves." When natural resources are just seized or destroyed in the name of development, it is almost always the poorest, most marginalized people who pay the absolute heaviest price. They lose the fuel, fodder, and water they rely on just for daily survival, pushing them straight into destitution, spotty contract labor, and endless cycles of debt.
Now, let's zoom back out for part 4, global climate threats. While those impacts are deeply, devastatingly local, they eventually snowball into planetary-scale crises. And I've got a slightly mind-blowing historical fact for you here. A Swedish scientist named Svante Arrhenius actually predicted global warming from human activity way back in 1896. Yeah, 1896. Yet here we are. Despite well over a century of scientists basically screaming warnings at us, and the landmark 1987 Brundtland Report trying to sound the alarm, we arrived at 2023 as the hottest year on record. Why? Because 80% of all human-caused carbon emissions right now are still pumping directly from fossil fuels.
And if we connect this global phenomenon back down to our localized view, the projections for India are downright dire. Climate models are predicting an average temperature spike in India of anywhere between 2.3 and 4.8 degrees Celsius. I mean, that level of extreme heat is a massive threat. It's going to drastically shorten wheat growing seasons and will make the vital summer monsoon totally unpredictable, triggering both severe droughts and catastrophic flooding. Plus, it threatens to displace millions more highly vulnerable people as coastlines erode and agricultural lands become unfarmable.
So, if unchecked economic development is the root of the problem, what's the framework for the solution? That brings us to Part 5, the sustainability pillars.
Let's move to the 1987 Brundtland Commission definition and see how this builds our foundation. They officially define sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It's an elegant concept that demands what we call intergenerational equity. Basically, we cannot just liquidate all of the planet's natural capital today, throw an economic party, and leave an entirely unlivable bankrupt world for tomorrow.
Now, sustainability is really often misunderstood as just hugging trees. But in reality, it's a highly delicate system built on three interconnected pillars: economic, social, and environmental. Think of it like a three-legged stool. If any one of those pillars cracks, the whole entire system comes crashing down. For example, remember the 2008 Great Recession? When the economic pillar completely fractured, nations almost immediately gutted their environmental laws. On the flip side, if a society is drowning in extreme poverty or war, meaning the social pillar is broken, caring for the environment literally drops to zero priority. True, lasting development has to elevate all three of those dimensions.
Okay, let's wrap things up with Part 6, Policies for the Future, looking at actionable steps.
So, how do governments actually pull off this incredibly complex balance? The source analysis outlines 4 massive, concrete policy shifts. First up, reduce poverty. Like we talked about, poverty literally forces people to deplete nature just to survive. Second, remove toxic subsidies. Actively subsidizing fossil fuels and chemical fertilizers is just incentivizing our own destruction. Third, clarify property rights. It's a classic problem. When valuable resources belong to no one, they get aggressively exploited by everyone. And fourth, we need aggressive, immediate investments in renewable energy, like solar and wind, so we can finally phase out fossil fuels.
To close out this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, really provocative thought drawn directly from the source material. Actually achieving sustainable development means we have to navigate some incredibly painful trade-offs. Take farming, for instance. Expanding agricultural production is crucial to guarantee food security for a booming population. But doing that could require cutting down forests, which wrecks biodiversity and supercharges climate change. So how do we balance those desperately competing needs? And maybe more importantly, how do we build real accountability across local, national, and international scales to ensure these super tough choices are actually made? It really is the defining challenge of our time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope unpacking this source material has left you with plenty to think about.